Starting from 1947 to 1967, the Nakba, the Zionist movement during the period of the British Mandate over Palestine, and even after the establishment of the State of Palestine, carried out a number of pre-planned things, the aim of which was to deport Palestinians and ethnic cleansing of Palestine, such as targeting Palestinian villages and cities by terrorist attacks launched by the Haganah organizations and the Irgun. These pre-planned methods have been discussed by several historical historians such as Ilan Pappé, Benny Morris and Walid Khalidi. These operations led to the seizure by Jews of approximately 78% of the area of historical Palestine, and the killing and forced displacement of 750,000 to 1 million Palestinians to neighboring countries and other parts of Palestine. The Palestinian refugees who came out of the areas on which Israel was founded formed a new nucleus for the Palestinian cause. Between 1947 and the 1948 war, about 750,000 Palestinian Arabs were displaced from their towns. After the end of the war, the Mandate area was divided between Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. Israel granted Israeli citizenship only to those who remained within its borders and refused the return of displaced Arabs from outside these borders. As for Jordan, it has granted its citizenship to residents of the West Bank, including refugees to it. The residents of the Gaza Strip and the refugees to it remained without citizenship, as Egypt refused to grant them Egyptian citizenship. Today, refugees make up almost half of the Palestinian people, about 6.4 million people as of 2020. Deir Yassin Massacre, main article, Deir Yassin Massacre. Deir Yassin is a Palestinian village located west of Jerusalem where a terrible massacre took place on April 9, 1948 by the two Zionist gangs, the Irgun and the Stern. That is 2 weeks after the signing of a peace treaty requested by the heads of neighboring Jewish settlements and approved by the people of the village of Deir Yassin. The victims of this massacre were large numbers of residents of this village, children, the elderly, women and young people. The number of victims of this massacre varies, as Arab and Palestinian sources state that between 250 and 360 victims were killed, while Western sources state that the number did not exceed 107 dead. The Deir Yassin massacre was an important factor in the Palestinian migration to other areas of Palestine and neighboring Arab countries because of the terror the massacre caused among civilians. The massacre added to the already existing hatred between Arabs and Israelis. The establishment of the State of Israel after the end of World War II in 1945, the attacks of Zionist gangs on the British troops in Palestine escalated, which led Britain to refer the Palestinian problem to the United Nations. And on April 28th, the session of the UN General Assembly on the question of Palestine began, and the sessions concluded on May 15, 1947, with the decision to form UNSCOP, the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, the committee consisting of 11 members. This committee published its report on September 8th. Most of its members supported the partition solution, while the remaining members recommended the Arab Supreme Council rejected the partition proposal, while the Jewish Agency announced its acceptance. On October 29th, the British government announced its intention to leave Palestine within 6 months if a solution acceptable to the Arabs and Zionists was not reached. In the period that followed, the pace of military operations escalated from all sides. The Zionists had well-thought-out plans that they implemented and controlled every area from which British troops were withdrawing. Meanwhile, the Arabs were in a state of military crisis due to the delay in taking effective measures to build a regular Arab force defending Palestine. The Zionist forces succeeded in occupying more areas than they received in the partition decision. Large numbers of Palestinians left their cities and villages because of the battles or because of the fear of massacres they heard about. On May 13th, Chaim Weizmann sent a letter to US President Truman asking him to fulfill his promise to recognize a Jewish state. The establishment of the State of Israel was announced in Tel Aviv on May 14th at 4 in the afternoon. The British High Representative left his official residence in Jerusalem for Britain. In the first minutes of May 15th, the British mandate over Palestine ended, and the declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel became effective. The United States of America recognized the State of Israel 10 minutes later, but the fighting continued. By the end of the war, Israel had become a reality, and it controlled more areas than stipulated by the decision to divide Palestine. It occupied from Palestine, according to the division of the British Mandate, the entire coastal plain except the Gaza Strip, which was controlled by the Egyptians. Additionally, Israel controlled the entire Negev, Galilee, and northern Palestine. The areas of East Jerusalem and the West Bank became part of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. The history of a broader front of conflict with Arab states began. The 1948 War. Main article, War of 1948. See also the sequence of events of the 1948 War and the list of massacres carried out during the period of the 1948 War and the Battle of Al-Qastal. The First War was for the Arabs after the birth of the modern Arab state, the War of 1948, which the Arabs considered Nakba. They called it the Nakba War. They also called it the Palestine War, and the Israelis called it the War of Independence. In the Western media, it is called the First Arab-Israeli War. It arose after the declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel on the land of Palestine on May 15, 1948, where the forces of 6 Arab countries, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq, entered Palestine to prevent the establishment of the Hebrew state on the land of Palestine. Military operations continued until January 1949, after Israel took control of the parts given to it by the Partition Resolution 194 and more. On that date, the issue of refugees was born with the exodus of more than 400,000 Palestinians from their homes to the West Bank, which was later followed by Jordan and the Gaza Strip, which was also annexed by Egypt, in addition to neighboring countries and the diaspora, to start the Arab-Israeli conflict. The Zionist leadership had begun to prepare detailed military plans since the beginning of 1945 in anticipation of the upcoming confrontation. And in May 1946, the Haganah drew up a plan, later called the May 1946 Plan. The general policy of this plan was to provide for so-called countermeasures. The Arab armies, upon entering Palestine after May 15, 1948, achieved significant victories. The Egyptian forces achieved tangible successes in the southern sector, as well as the Jordanian and Iraqi forces in the Jerusalem front and the northern West Bank. These operations caused embarrassment to the Zionist forces, the effects of which were soon removed by the Security Council's decision on May 22, 1948, to cease fire for 36 hours. The Arab countries rejected that decision at the time, but the United States and Britain exerted intense pressure, accompanied by threats to the Arab governments. The British delegation to the Security Council submitted a new request to stop the fighting for 4 weeks and to control the flow of volunteers and weapons to Palestine during that period. On June 2nd, the Arab states informed the Security Council of their approval of that resolution, and the fighting actually stopped on June 11th. That period was known as the First Truce. However, the shaky will of the Arab rulers in those days, the lack of coordination between the Arab armies despite their sacrifices, the support and training received by the Zionist gangs by Britain since the Second World War, in addition to the superiority of the Israelis in numbers. All this led to the defeat of the Arab armies and the fall of more than 78% of the land of Palestine to the Hebrew state, more than the area allocated to it in the partition in 1947, where 55% of the land of Palestine was given to the Jews. And as soon as we're done, Rhett, There will be a video that will be your wonder forgotten. Subscribe to the channel and activate the gras so that they will connect you all new with Islam.